I promised today that we were going to read the Tiger and the Traveler story, like I told from last week that I wrote with the kids, the worksheets, and Mary's story, one of my clients, the story I wrote with her. So before I do that, do you guys have any questions or reflections from last week? All about the kids at the hospital? We talked a lot about that. We didn't finish the chapter, but we talked about, this was chapter 6, Ancient Indian Stories Unfolded at a Modern Psychiatric Hospital, and we got to page 122. And I know it was a lot for some people to hear all these stories. Anything anybody want to share? Go ahead, Ludwig.
Yes. Many things came to my mind. The first one is because you explained to us that you wrote the book about the ego. So I was thinking, wow, for Joshika's ego, what an adventure, what an experience it must have been.
Certainly was.
Yeah.
It was flattened down like a pancake most days.
You know. So I was really impressed, how to continue, being attacked, literally. You know.
You were attacked. It was like every day you were attacked, and then you were attacked by your boss. She wasn't trying to be mean, but like there's so much work demands, and then the psychiatrist was always on you for doing something wrong, and then the insurance companies were coming to meet with you and picking apart your work, and then the kids were angry at you and attacking you. I mean, there's no cushion. It was a good insight. It was a very hard 2 years. Yeah. And then you're trying to get licensed, so there's so many details. I was under a boss, like a normal boss, and a supervision, which is a different thing to get licensed in the state. So then they're picking you apart too, saying, well, what now, as a new trainee, you shouldn't do that, and you shouldn't do that, and make sure you like that. You can get sued for that. And you're like, oh my God. It was high stress. And the ego was just, there was no chance for that. Yeah, that's a good training in humility, becoming humble, And also by the time I was working there, I had been studying very seriously for 2 years. The third year you get to do, it's like a residency. So I'd studied everything for years. So I thought, oh yeah, I know this. What a joke, And I'd already done a year as a counselor and a grief counselor. So I'm like, okay, I've worked with dying people, grieving people. Working with kids is going to be so easy, please. No. Working with dying people is also something special for the ego. So I thought, okay, I've got that covered. I've got all my hours done, because you have to get approved to do this final licensure for state licensure. Working at the hospital, I was getting licensed to be in private practice. But before that, I was getting licensed just to practice. At a company, basically, at a hospital or something, Anyway, so that was the final thing, and it was like you're at the top of the mountain, hanging on by just string. That's how it feels at the end, especially with that kind of job. Yeah.
And then I was really impressed about how facing so huge abuse, the children, the trauma was expressed through the body, shouting or pooping, or because in a certain way, to survive or to continue to live, it has to express itself in a certain way. Yeah. And I was trying to understand with the different part of the mind, what is playing. Is it completely, I guess that's completely the manas which gets distorted. I was thinking, and how about their ego? How is it going on? I had this question in my mind because I can see that physically there's something which needs to express itself to continue to live, to exist at all costs, and to support. So I don't know, is it a coping mechanism in a very extreme way, as we do have coping mechanism?
Yeah.
And then I continued reading, and then I got an answer to my last question. So.
Okay.
But I was really, thinking, wow, how the human body, how the system is made so that we can still,
It's kind of like a defense mechanism in a way, but it's also a way to get attention. At the root cause of every issue, Babaji says, is lack of love, right? So what they're all these different weird things, seemingly weird things that were happening, was a desperate cry for love and attention. And that's what I realized. When I gave them love, they cooled down, they calmed down. The only one who didn't was that screaming girl. I couldn't give her love, she wouldn't accept anything. She would just scream and yell, that one who had really high anxiety, I don't know, I never knew her story. I only met her like a couple times, and then she was discharged. But the rest of them, even the boy who was throwing the poop, and even the girl who was cutting herself every day, the girl who tried to hang herself, all these different stories that you're like, this is so extreme, as soon as you gave them love, which means basically give them attention, just sit and listen to their story. That's it. And then they started calming down, I'm not trying to simplify it. It's a lot of hours of paying very close attention to them, not telling them they're wrong, and not trying to educate them, not trying to lecture them, not trying to, just walking into their world. And when I did that, everything cools down. And that's not the only thing. They also have a psychiatrist prescribing medications. They also have other therapists, art therapy, and other types of things they're doing. So I can't say that, I just gave them love and presto, they're better. It's a whole team effort. But the overall idea was even the psychiatrist was giving them love. She was a young woman. She was young and she was brilliant. She was so surprising for what I thought a psychiatrist was like up until that point that I had met, They're very cold. You feel very judged by them, It feels very not comfortable, You feel like they make you feel worse about what's wrong with you. But this one, she was so nice and loving and kind, and she loved kids. And she would sit with them and hear their story. And she would always give them the most mild diagnosis. She loved to teach, so she would meet with us and teach all the therapists, how to think of them in a loving way. She would tell us something good about them, even if they had just punched one of us or spit on us. She would tell a good story about them. So it was a very loving approach that is what kind of healed them. And I don't want to underplay the medicine. They needed to get stabilized with the meds, but the main thing was it was coming out in their body because their buddhi was, they're young. So the buddhi wasn't working to control this other stuff. So it was that combination of the manas, those samskaras coming up into the screen of the manas and making them act out, and the buddhi didn't control it. And the ahankara was just like, I want to be somebody. Because it's just your identity, right? So ahankara is just like, I'd rather be bad than be nobody. I'd rather be bad than be invisible. I'd rather scream out. I'd rather do anything rather than be, a nobody. Yeah, go ahead, Kamala.
I was touched by seeing how, I don't know if this we can call it innocence, but to when they start to reveal their own stories and to open up in a group.
Yeah.
So this we call it magic thing that has happened because something like unexpected.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking because the children they can keep this. There was not maliciousness, and they respond to the love, and so I don't know if this is correct. This is also half a question of my question. Is this because the innocence is there? There is no maliciousness. They were abused, they were suffering, but when they respond to the love and they felt to trust. So maybe this is the.
But adults do it too. So I wouldn't call it innocence, I'd call it story. So when you're hearing someone else's story, your ahankara drops.
Okay.
And then your heart's open and you're like, that's what Babaji's doing all the time too, right? He's telling stories, especially in Bhagavad Gita, you're like, oh, look at Arjuna, but actually that's us, So when you tell a story, the ahankara, our ahankara of who I am, drops down. And then we also spill the beans. When I run group therapy with adults, the same thing happens. If you tell a story, then other people go, actually, that happened to me too. Or I was. So we can say, sure, definitely love had to be there as a foundation because they're not going to even hear the story if you're not in a loving mood with them. If you're not you have to not criticize and be kind and open. But the secret weapon is the story. But not everybody can get somebody to open with a story. So it's like that combination of being loving and kind and supportive, and then telling a story that they can relate to, and then you don't have to do much more. Then they just start being like, oh, me too, or so.
Actually, you were telling the story of the tiger.
The boy.
I was the tiger.
I'm going to get to that next week. I want to stop there because this. We'll keep going with the second half of this chapter. Go ahead, Vilas.
So in the beginning of this reading, or of this class, you said that that working with dying people or grieving people, you thought that working with children would be easier. So therefore I'm interested in what is so difficult about working with grieving people or people facing death. And I'm asking because in my life, I don't have so much to do with children, but death and dying, for sure it will come. So I'm curious now, what is the difficult thing that's there on the horizon and coming up?
With death and dying, you mean to work with somebody who's dying?
No, for someone who is about
Somebody who's dying?
Yeah.
Have you ever had a romantic relationship and you've had a breakup?
Yes.
How was that for you?
Oh, very painful.
Times 100. So your identity is with that person, and maybe you're with them for a few years, But your identity with your body and your mind and all that, you're with yourself, and then all the relationships, you have to say goodbye to all that. So every painful thing, like sometimes when people have a breakup, they stop eating, or they just get really depressed, or they get really angry, or they just do stupid stuff because they're not thinking straight. And afterwards they're like, I wish I never did that, Now imagine that's only just with a person, one relationship that you've had for oftentimes not that long. But now you're going to say goodbye to all of your relationships. Relationship with yourself, with your body, with everything related to yourself, all your identities, and everyone else. It's incredibly painful. When they were training me to be a grief counselor, they made us play a game. And in the game, they give you all these different cards, And then they make you rank them. And then every time we do a round, you have to give up one. Like your relationship with your mother. You have to choose if you're going to give up, that person's dying. Your mother, your father, your job, your legs, like your mind. And then slowly but surely, the way the game ends is you've lost everything. But even just playing the game, people were crying. And they did that so they could help us have empathy for the people who we're going to be working with. So what happens when you're working with somebody who's dying or who's losing somebody? It's very painful. And then oftentimes, if you're the therapist, guess who they take it out on? The one who's trying to help. And then you have to get in there and you're trying to help them, but then they're fighting with their brother over the mother's money, and they're fighting with their sister because the sister's this is the one who lives nearby, and she's not taking good care of the mother. And there's so much that comes up, and also for you, if you're the one dying, it's very hard to say goodbye because for some reason, actually we probably know why, but basically, we think we're eternal. Our body's eternal, so we don't want to say goodbye. We still think, no, just give me that one last treatment. Or let's give it one last try. And the person's 1 pound, they're on their last, or the families, one of the biggest fights with families is the family's the way they show love is by feeding the person who's dying. But the person's digestive system has shut down. And then the family's fighting, no, give them, their favorite thing is steak. And they're they can't even have a milkshake right now. They're their digestion is shut down, they're dying. Half their body's purple. The blood is going out, they're dying, because it's a slow process often. And so you have to try to educate the family, and then the family gets mad at you. No, you're cutting off how we love our mother. We want to give her the chocolate fudge cake, So it's trouble on any end, if you're the dying person or if you're the person who loves the dying person. It's very painful. And then the therapist, you're trying to get in there and trying to help everybody, and that's a hard job. That's why I thought, okay, what could be worse? Working with little kids, I can do this with my eyes closed. That's what I thought. Yeah, and then after that, the job I had was working with drug addicts at an addiction treatment center. And I thought, that's going to be easy. I've already worked with these kids. I've already worked with dying people, so this is going to be easy. And that was really not easy either. They had me run once a week a therapy group with 60 recovering addicts. And when they're recovering, they're in treatment. They're just coming off the alcohol and the drugs. So they're in a horrible mood because they can't have their drug, and they're just physically feeling horrible. And they're angry, and they're finally sober now for a few days, and they have to actually realize the damage they've done in all their relationships and in their life because they're sober now. They don't want to be in group therapy, and I've got 60 of them. It's a huge room with 60. And I'm like, all right, how do you do group therapy with 60 people? You can't even anyway, so that was not an easy job either. Not easy being human, actually. That's the takeaway, I say. Whether you're dying, whether you're a kid, whether you're addicted to something. Any other questions? Hi, Isabel.
Hi. I would like to share that the Traveler and the Tiger, I went and got it and listened to it.
Oh, nice.
And have shared the information with a physical education teacher this morning.
Oh, cool.
And she's taking it to her school
Aww.
to see if they can include it in the 1 to 8th grade.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So it made a big impact on me to do that Traveler and the Tiger.
Did you like it? Did you like the cartoon?
I thought it was exceptionally well done.
It was fun to make. All right.
So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, keep us posted on what happens. I'd love to hear.
I'm very hopeful.
Yeah. Okay, so let's switch gears now to that. So what I'll do for those of you who are listening online, I will post these 2 stories that I wrote with Babaji on The Tiger and the Traveler, and then the one I wrote, that one I wrote with Babaji, and then I also have Mary's story, the story I wrote with her, my client. I'm going to post both of these if you're listening online for you guys, so you can read along. I mean, you can download it, you can have a copy. You can share it with any school teachers you know or any kids you know, because it's a worksheet. And for those of you who are here, I made copies for you. So if somebody wants to help me hand out, there's 4 for this side, and then there's, I think, 5 or 6 for this side. Thank you very much, Melody. Okay? So I'm going to read now The Tiger and the Traveler. All right? So this is the first story I wrote. Thank you, Melody. You got one, Vilas? Back there? Okay. The Tiger and the Traveler. So I had this printed locally, and it's a little messed up, so I'm sorry. Like there's some weird things, like the "and" didn't come through. It's a question mark, but anyway. Okay. So The Tiger and the Traveler. So this is the worksheet that was the first one I used with the kids. Okay. Once upon a time, a traveler was wandering in a forest in India. He came across an old tiger that had just finished bathing himself. As he was drying in the afternoon sun, he stood on the bank of a river and said, "Oh, traveler, please accept this gold bracelet as a gift from me." The traveler thought to himself, "I'm poor, and I could really use that gold to help me live. But then again, I should not accept a desirable thing from a dangerous source." The traveler remembered something his teacher Babaji from the Center for Love ashram had once told him, which was, this is me trying to tell the kids, Center for Love, you know. Before embarking on a venture, one should carefully weigh out the advantages and disadvantages. And if there are more disadvantages, then you should not do it. Intelligence means that we see both sides of a situation, the advantages and the disadvantages, the risks and the rewards. Greed can blind one from seeing the disadvantage of the situation. So that's as far as I got, like just a tiny little bit, you know? And then I would ask a question. So then I said to the kids, the discussion question was, if you were the traveler, would you take the tiger's offer of the gold bracelet? And then we would all talk about it, you know, and they would say, yes, no. And I'd be like, why, you know? And then, and I said, what are the advantages and disadvantages of taking the bracelet? So just this alone would be like an hour. We would really, literally read just that, and then the rest of the time, like 50 minutes, just discussing. Now, what are the advantages? Do you agree with him, or do you agree with her, or, you know? And have them try to convince each other why their idea is right, you know? It was so cute to hear them. And then you could see why they ended up getting taken advantage of. Some of them lived on the street before they were admitted to the hospital, and you could see the innocence. You could see why what their reasoning was, you know, to take it or not. And some of them were not young, you know. They were like, one of the boys who was like 15 years old, and he's like, I'd take the bracelet. I'm like, you would? Why? You know? So it's, you know, and then some of the younger ones were like very street smart, and they'd be like, oh no, you know, he's gonna, you know. So it was really interesting. And then I tried to have them convince each other and really say their reasons. So it's a very good like brain, you know, thinking exercise, this. Okay, so we discussed that. So then we'd get like the next, you know, day when we meet again for a group, Then we would start again and we'd say, okay, the traveler then said to the tiger, let me first examine the bracelet before I decide if I want to take it from you. The tiger stretched out his paw and showed it to the traveler. Is Isabel there? Oh, it looks like she left for a minute. It's very cute in the cartoon how he made the tiger paw stretching out and stuff, because what I did was I put in like actual clips of a real tiger and also mixed with cartoon, so then there's like a real tiger actually, you can anyway, you could see it, but it was very fun to make it, and we had music playing with it that's very playful, so it's very engaging. So the tiger stretched out his paw and showed it to the traveler. The traveler asked, how can I trust a ferocious animal like you? The tiger said, listen, O traveler, when I was young, I did a lot of bad things. I committed many sins, from killing cows to even killing human beings. Because of my killings, my wife and sons have died, and I am left completely alone. I felt very depressed and lonely without my family. So to end my suffering, I asked for some advice from a saint. He told me that in order to repent for my sins, I should be religious, take a bath every day in the river, and also give gifts as charity. Do you not see that I was just taking a bath when you arrived? I'm following the saint's advice word for word, so please take my gift so I can get rid of my past sins and find some happiness in my life again. If you were the traveler, what would you do and why? So you see, I just basically keep asking the same question and see if they're getting convinced by this, what we call bakwas, right? This traveler, this tiger is totally trying to pull the wool over his eyes and trick the traveler, right? And so we're seeing, and then I would argue for taking it, with the kids. I'd be like, why not? The poor old man, look at him, and I would say the points, and then they'd be like, oh yeah, you're right, just to see how easy they would be to, how easy they could be fooled, So then we would discuss that, and then usually that would go for the whole hour. And okay, see you next time. And then we come, okay, now we're getting part 3 of the story. And so the next part, we said the tiger stayed silent, not responding to the tiger, still not sure what to do. So the tiger continued talking, saying, look at me, I'm old now. My claws are dull, my teeth are not sharp like they once used to be. The traveler was left wondering, can a tiger really change his nature? So then we go back again. So now how are you feeling about the tiger? Do you think a tiger can change his nature? Why or why not? And that's a very interesting discussion, right? They would be like, yeah, so-and-so did. They didn't understand basically that someone was tricking them. They'll say that somebody was really nice to them in their life, and then they change the nature, And I wasn't really in the mood of educating them at that time. I was just trying to get them to talk and to share and see as a group what kind of consensus they could come to. And at the end would be education time. But here I was just trying to let everything out. And that was part of the art of storytelling and getting them to tell their stories, is I didn't jump in too soon. In other words, I would let them say things that were completely wrong. In terms of basically I would want to say, no, that's not true. But I just let them tell their story and let them have a dialogue. And by doing that, they shared more and more and more over these weeks and months, And then the ones who got it, then I'd be like, why don't you explain a little more to your, to someone else in the group instead of me doing it. And they learned better from each other. That was the other thing, because they were friends. They were living together there. They trusted each other more, So I mostly just facilitated instead of being like, listen to me, because they're like, who are you? You haven't been on the streets like us. You haven't been abused like us. You're just some therapist, So I really held back from that and let them educate each other and let the story also educate them. And just ask questions and be like, well, what do you think about that? Could that be true in any way? And they'd be like, no. I'm like, okay, it's not true, and just hope that maybe, because I also had written 6 of these, so sometimes it was the same theme in every story, who to trust and all that. And so I didn't have to teach them right away, let them kind of come to it on their own. So yeah, they talked about how they're feeling about the tiger, and some of them were like, oh my God, the poor tiger, he's so old, I feel bad. Of course, I want to give him a hug. Look at how cute he is. I'm like, oh my God, And some of the kids were teenagers. And then you could see why they got in so much trouble in their lives, because they trusted the wrong people. So it was very telling. Okay, so then the next part was the old tiger continued, I'm a religious tiger now. I study the Bible and scriptures. I give to charity and I tell the truth. I'm not greedy, and I'm patient and forgiving of others. Can't you see how many good qualities I have? Look, I'm humbly offering you, a complete stranger to me, my very own gold bracelet. I know it is difficult for you to trust me because you think that all tigers eat men. Just because I was born ferocious doesn't mean that I'll always be ferocious. I don't know what else you want from me to prove to you that I'm worthy of your trust. Just trust me. So the discussion was around like, now what do you think? Now would you trust the tiger? Same question, right? And what would you do if you were the traveler? Would you take the bracelet? And this was interesting, actually. One part I don't think I talked about much was that a lot of these kids, either they didn't have a father or their father was in prison. Sometimes for murder, sometimes for like heavy drugs. Like definitely the father wasn't coming out, you know? And so these kids were like, of course I trust the tiger, you know, because my dad, he murdered someone, but he's a good guy, you know? And one day he'll come around. Because every child wants to love their mother and father, you know, they don't want to see the bad in them because that's, their ahankar is identified with my mother and my father, and even though maybe they're in prison, they want to see the good in them. So that was getting projected onto this story too, and they would tell the stories of their parents in jail and all the stuff the parents did to them. And, you know, how maybe their parents were coming soon to get them, you know. So then I could see why they trust the tiger. But of course, none of that ever came out in therapy. Nothing, you know. In therapy, they would not talk about anything. But all of a sudden, we're talking about the tiger, and look, don't you feel bad for him? Just trust me. And they're like, yeah, I trust my dad. But I would have like, you know, 20 pages of notes of all the stuff the dad did to them when they are admitted to the hospital, because the file comes from all the other places they'd been, all the other centers they'd been, that they'd been kicked out of, all the schools they'd been in, that they'd been kicked out of, all the other families that had tried to take them in, that they've been kicked out of, you know? So you're reading through 20 pages of all the stuff that the parents had done to them, and then they're, yeah, I would trust the tiger, you know? Yeah.
Did anybody wonder or ask what the tiger is talking?
No, that's a good question. No, they got kind of completely absorbed in the story. You know, I don't think they're too smart for that.
That would be the first thing, you know,
Yeah.
if I trust a tiger
Yeah.
who's talking, maybe
Yeah.
that's a special tiger.
Good point. Okay, just trust me. Okay, so then we get to the next part that says, the traveler still did not respond, and he was carefully considering everything the tiger was saying. The tiger added, I myself have also suffered greatly in my life, so I can understand your misery in that you're hungry and you're poor right now. So I offer this bracelet to you out of compassion. I do not expect anything in return. Please follow the religious principles and bathe your body in this river so you can be pure. Then come across to get my gift of this gold bracelet to you. In India, giving and accepting charity are considered as religious acts. Before engaging in a religious act, one must purify by taking a bath. Therefore, the tiger asked the traveler to take a dip in the nearby river before accepting the bracelet. This was to prove to the traveler that the tiger is really a religious one, because he knows the principle of religion. The traveler thought to himself, is this tiger faking compassion for me because he really wants to eat me? Or does he really feel bad for my suffering and he wants to help me? He said he does not expect anything in return for his gift of the gold bracelet, which makes me think he's truly compassionate. So then I asked the kid, so if you were the traveler, what would you say to the tiger now? Would you accept his gift of the bracelet? Why or why not? And surprisingly, quite a few were still like, yes. Oh, that poor old tiger. Of course I'd accept it. Yeah, he's having a hard time, and I can relate to what he's saying. And some of them are like, no, he's bad, you know. But I would let that happen. I wouldn't try to arrive at the whole group. I would let that, you know, those two different ones. And then there's some people who are like, I don't know. And I'd let that be there too. Just let them be in whatever they were thinking and let them discuss it and let them keep thinking and sharing, you know. We're going to say something, Kamala?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, this idea to be compassionate and just play the strings of, yes, I know how much you have suffered.
Mhm.
Basically put yourself in the feet of the other person, the shoes of the other person who went through so many things. And then take advantage of that, obviously. But so this is a kind of strategy that crooked people are also using.
Mhm.
No? So then I found it very, very dangerous
Mhm.
strategy. No? So I could maybe half, like fall. If somebody say, "Oh, poor you, you're I know that you suffer a lot.
Yeah.
I am your friend."
Yeah.
So I can also
Mhm.
find myself, maybe I will trust,
Mhm.
because I don't have a figure who tell me, no,
Mhm.
don't do that.
Yeah.
So then it's very easy to,
Yeah, this is the cognitive empathy.
yeah.
So
exactly.
cognitive empathy, you can describe, you can see, you're not feeling something for them, but you can see. You can analyze them very well, and you can say, oh, you're hungry, and oh, you're poor, and oh, you'd like to. He's not really feeling that. So it is a type of empathy that you can see the situation, but you don't feel it. And that's how if you remember I was teaching last year, if you don't have the feeling part, that's how you can manipulate other people. Because you don't care if you hurt them. You're just trying to get your own gain,
Yeah, this is really,
Yeah, the tiger could read the mind very well, and he knew exactly what to say to the traveler to make him be like, oh, he sees me. Oh, what a charitable person, he's going to give me the bracelet, Okay. So the traveler weighed out the options of taking the bracelet in order to use it to buy some food, clothes, and shoes, but also risking his life if the tiger decides to eat him. The traveler then thought, the tiger's old, and he's also religious now. I think he has changed. Also, with that money, I would love to buy some pizza and Coca-Cola. I just try to think of what the kids would like, because they're locked in this hospital, so they didn't get pizza and Coca-Cola. So I thought, okay, what would be something that they'd be like, yes. I think I should trust the old tiger and take the gold bracelet. And so the traveler walked into the river to bathe himself. But as he walked in, he felt that the bottom of the river was very muddy. His legs got stuck all the way up past his knees in mud. Uh-oh, I think I just made a big mistake, he exclaimed. And then he started thinking, as he stood there stuck in the mud, because what else could he do now? The traveler thought, I don't think a tiger's nature can change. He tricked me with his words, acting like he was so kind and compassionate. And out of my desire and greed for the gold bracelet, I fell for his lies. I did not properly act as I put my faith in a ferocious animal. My mind made a reasonable justification for this irrational decision I've made, and I believed my mind. Why did I listen to my mind? It was so convincing. Oh, only if I did not love pizza and Coca-Cola and fries so much, my mind could have made a decision in peace. But I was so tempted by my taste buds that I became weak. So weak, in fact, that I fell for the tiger's temporary show of good character, which hid his actual nature. It is like when my older brother and I used to be fighting and screaming at each other, and then my mother would enter the room, and my brother would instantly put on his sweet voice like everything was fine. Just like my brother faked his true feelings, the tiger did the same thing to me. How could I have been such a fool? So then, in the discussion, we said, can you think of a time in your life when you believed someone who was hiding his or her true nature like the tiger was? And what happened? How can you know what someone's true nature is before you get too close and risk getting hurt? So that was a very long, I think we met from multiple groups on that topic, this one. And one of the boys in the group admitted that he was a tiger. I think I wrote about it a little later in the book. He was a tiger, and that in the group he admitted that 3 of those girls that he was dating, and that he was using fake words to convince them that they were the only one for him. And the girls were looking at each other and they're like, you bitch, well, you too, no, he's mine, So they weren't even mad at him. They were mad at each other. And he was like, but it all came out. All this stuff came out. Yeah. Seeing the traveler in that condition, the tiger said, "Oh my God, you are stuck in the mud. Wait, I'll help you." The tiger slowly came near the traveler and ate him up for lunch. So what is something that you learned from this story that you can apply to your decision-making process when making friends? And you know what was interesting about this, you guys? It's never what I thought the takeaway was. Whenever, like, I'd be, I mean, to me it'd be obvious, like, don't trust somebody who with, like the tiger, who has the characteristics of the tiger, somebody who's, you know is ferocious, don't trust them. But the kids, their takeaways would be something like really, what I would do is I'd actually have them write it and make it like a picture and write it and then show it to the group. And I'd say, okay, next week we're gonna meet, we're gonna do arts and crafts, and tell me your takeaway. It would never be the actual thing I was trying to get them to learn. And then I also realized that I have to think bigger and broader than that, In my mind, there's an obvious takeaway, but it was never that, but they still got a takeaway, And often they were very creative takeaways. Things that were, for them, was a takeaway, It was still a takeaway. So that's another interesting thing about storytelling. We're all hearing the stories through our own samskaras. So even though I'm like, here's the obvious takeaway, it's not the takeaway they needed for them at that time. So to hear their own takeaway, we have to leave space for that. So because I left space for them to discuss and just, and don't try to control it too much, I left space also for the takeaways. So I didn't really try to tell them, actually, no, this is it. I was like, okay, that's your takeaway, that your father's a nice person. I'm like, okay, whatever it was. So sometimes it wasn't at the point at all. But the fact that they were just thinking and maybe understanding something different. I was exaggerating there. It wasn't like that. But just things that were a little bit on a tangent or, but still through the discussion, they had realized something. And that was better than nothing, which is what it was before we had these stories, running groups. So what do you guys think? Some of you read the original Hitopadesha that Babaji wrote on the tiger and the traveler. So this is, I took that from what he had written, and made it very simplified for these kids. Anything you want to share before I go to the next story, Mary's story?
It's just so hard to recognize the tiger.
Yeah. Yes.
I had encountered 2 tigers last year, even, and the second one I could absolutely not recognize until it was too late.
Yeah. It's very hard.
So it's not always like...
It's not so obvious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It can come in many different forms and disguises.
Yes. The takeaway that because for each of the stories, almost the same thing with the kids. So the takeaway that I was trying to help them see in a subtle way was this, because they also couldn't recognize it. And then the next story, it's the similar thing, but the main thing, the thread through the whole thing is, everybody who's approaching you wants something from you, if you think that way, and you want something from them, and that's why it works.
Yeah. Even though in my case, the second one, I didn't want anything. It was pure threat.
So then you'd still wanted something.
The only thing I wanted is to get free.
Yeah, exactly. So that's enough.
Yeah. If you counter that as a negative, it's an apava.
Yeah, but you have to, if you want something, then they can get something from you. If they scare you, then you want to be free or you don't want to be scared. But if you are, it doesn't work if you don't want anything. It doesn't work. You have to want something, and you have to be sometimes it's very subtle what you want. But if it's I want to be free or I don't want to be afraid or there's something, and they know how to hook you, they know how to poke you and see where they know the perfect thing to say. Like there was this I forgot where I heard about it, but there was a story about, I know it's a common story about some man. He was like a banker, in London, making a lot of money and everything. And I forgot how he got hooked up with somebody who like wrote him or something, but bottom line is, it was basically a woman who came on the call with him and basically starts taking her clothes off. And then he was like, ooh. And she's like, take yours off too. And he's like, ooh, And he ran to the bathroom. He was at work in London, at a bank. And he ran to the bathroom and he's taking his clothes off and she's taking her clothes off in the bathroom at the bank, And then after, she sends a video. She videoed him naked. And she said, do you want to keep your job? Then send me like 200,000, what's it called in Europe? Euro? pounds, 200,000 pounds. And he's like, what? And she's like, and if you don't do it by this amount of time, I'm going to also send it to your wife. I have all of your family contact information. And he was like, shoot. So then he did it. But then they made the next threat. And then basically he killed himself. He committed suicide. So that's what I'm saying. But what he wanted was not to be exposed. But imagine he didn't care. Imagine he didn't have any fear. He's like, screw it, I don't care. Let the bank know. I quit. And let my wife know. I'll get a divorce. But he didn't. He had so much fear that he would be exposed. Because of why? His ahankara. His ahankara is, I'm a banker and I'm kind of perfect and I'm smart and I have a high position. I'm going to lose my money. I'm going to lose my power. I'm going to lose my possession. I'm going to lose my wife. So he had a lot of fear, and that's what they caught him on. But there's always something. So the more you are aware of yourself and what your thing is, the less you can get hooked. Because if you're like, I don't need anything, then even if someone contacts you, you're like, I don't need anything from you, you know? But that guy, what did he need at the beginning? It seems like he needed nothing, right? But apparently he must have not been having very great sex with his wife, because why would some naked girl who's stripping down, why would he even respond to that? If he was having a very good sex life with his wife, why would he respond to that? He wouldn't.
He did have a desire. I mean,
yeah, sex desire.
To fall for such a thing.
That's what I'm saying. He did.
That's I mean, that's obvious, really. I mean, somebody comes to you, a strange person, and asks you to become naked. I mean, this is so obvious.
Yeah, it is when you're not him. But he's a smart person to be that high up in a bank. So someone would say that about your story too.
That's my story. Is so many you see every week you see in the newspapers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is everyone? It's not obvious if it's happening to you though, because it's easier to poke holes at other people. But when you're in it and when it's happening, you have a good reason to do it because they've picked on the part of you that's weak in some way, either because of a desire or because of a fear, something. So they pick on you. And then everyone's like, oh, that's so obvious. How could he not see that? Come on. Or how could she not see that? But really when it's in the moment, same thing with the tiger. So obvious, But people would get fooled. So that's the takeaway for it, is that you have to be very clear on what your fears are, where you're attached, where, all that stuff. So then people can't hook you, Okay, I'm going to read Shiba's big secret. Ready? So this is Mary's story. Last week, remember I said, no wonder by Mary at age 12, basically what happened was when I got her as a client at the hospital, they said that she was a drug addict, basically. She was doing drugs and she was like, smoking. She was sitting on the roof of her house and she fell off the roof of her house because she was doing drugs and, she ran away from home. She had done very many risky things. And so she had to be hospitalized. Any kid in the hospital there was a danger to themselves and or to society. That's why they were there. So this very sweet little girl was there and I'm like, why is she here, And they said, oh, she's a drug addict. And she had fallen off the roof and she'd run away from home and she had been doing very dangerous things, And she was completely closed-lipped in therapy sessions with me. She would never really say anything. She would just, sorry. Oh, I have a really bad cramp. In my leg. She would really just avert the truth, Did you guys ever get these leg cramps?
I just had it 2 minutes ago.
I'm taking a new medicine now, and that's one of the side effects of. Yeah. Sorry. Huh? No, I just need to stand probably for a minute.
Yeah. It's the calf?
Huh? Yeah, it's my calf. It's really tight. Maybe I'll sit with my legs down. That might help instead of crossed. Okay. Okay. So Mary, remember, so the head said she was like a drug addict, basically. And she would never really, she's 11. She would never really tell me very much in individual therapy at all. She would just talk about not the people in the unit or something, or she missed home or something like that. Nothing substantial. So, but when we started telling these stories, she kind of opened when she could tell her story, kind of like the tiger and the travel, because I had asked them, do you have a tiger in your life? And a lot of them opened up saying yes, they did. And so this is about the tiger in Mary's life. Okay? So the way it worked was in the therapy sessions, we wrote it together. And I'd always start off and say, okay, what animal? I did it with 3 clients over a few month period because it took many sessions to write their story, So I asked Mary, what animal do you want to be? And what's the story going to be about? And then we kind of would go on Google and pick out images. So this is a picture. She wanted to be a Shiba Inu. It's a kind of dog. You can see it. I'll hold it up so everybody can see. I don't know if you guys can see on there. But a Shiba Inu dog. This is the picture she picked. Okay? So meet Shiba, an 11-year-old Shiba Inu puppy dog who is full of love, laughter, and just plain old fun. So now Mary is the dog. Mary's the Shiba Inu, okay? Shiba had a knack for making everyone around her smile. She also had the uncanny ability to say the perfect thing at the perfect time to cheer up any friend on even their darkest of days. This is Shiba's personal story of a secret that she kept for a long time and how keeping that secret affected her life. And so the way this also went was we were writing the story, but she knew that we were preparing this to read in the group, in her therapy group, you know, so we were preparing it like with discussion questions and everything, you know. So then we said, discussion 1, have you ever kept a secret for a long time? And how did keeping the secret affect you? And that opened up a whole can of worms with these kids, you know. And they already were comfortable because we had read 6 Hitopadesha stories over many, many months. So when it came to these 3 kids' stories, that's the last 3 things I did before I graduated out of the hospital, you know. I ended on these 3. And so this group was very open with each other and ready to share. It wasn't like the Tiger and the Traveler at the beginning, whenever, you know, they weren't used to this yet. They liked it, but they weren't used to sharing yet. They had kind of bonded. And some people, you know, were discharged and some new students were there, but many of them stayed almost through all of this, you know. So by the time was it like, you know, have you ever had a secret for a long time? Some of them just started saying yes, you know. And even just this one page, I think we met many times, many sessions just for this one, because people wanted to share, they wanted to share their secrets. If I tell you Shiba's secret now, the story will be no fun. So just listen. Shiba used to love to smoke a lot of bones. So she wanted to call them dog bones, but it was actually marijuana. Shiba used to love to smoke a lot of bones. That seems kind of weird for a dog because dogs usually like to eat dog bones. But not our dear Shiba. She liked to smoke her bones. And when she smoked the bones, they made her feel, well, happy, very happy. Smoking bones also made her feel important, energetic, and powerful. So those of you guys who are working with me in some sort of group therapy or individual therapy, you know I always go to the feelings wheel, right? Even 15 years ago, whenever that was, I was doing this. I was like, Mary, tell me 3 feelings. And she got out the feelings wheel and she's like, important. I was like, how does smoking the bones make you feel, Mary? And she's like, important, energetic, and powerful. Okay, good, let's write it, you know. She sometimes would sit and stare into space and just start giggling after she smoked a bone. Now the thing is she never told me any of this. But because we wrote a story, she just started letting everything out, what it was like when she smoked pot, you know, and the whole thing. And she was a good storyteller. She liked to share it, you know. Other times, she would lay on her back and just pass out with that spacey smile on her face. And then she would pick the picture too. She's like, oh yeah, I was like that. I was like, okay, where should we put it? You know, and then look at doesn't that dog look high? I mean, the dog's like, so she was picking these pictures. Other times, okay. One time, Shiba almost seriously got hurt after smoking some bones. You see, smoking bones made her feel high. So high that she wanted to see if she could fly. So she jumped off her roof. Her friends who smoked bones with her were waiting on the ground below, encouraging her to jump. This is what got her admitted to the hospital. Not for physical broken bones, for, you know, danger. They thought it was funny. But then again, they were high too. Her best friend, Merrick, did not smoke bones. She was worried as she saw her friend changing for the worse and engaging in dangerous behavior. So Merrick gathered up her courage and tried to talk some sense into Shiba, begging her not to smoke bones, but Shiba would not listen. So I don't know if people who are listening online, if you guys can see this, but I'll try to see. There's a picture of her, the dog standing on the roof, and then this is probably too far away to see it, but you'll see it when I send it also. I'll post it in the discussion group. Okay, so the discussion question we wrote for the group was, if you were Shiba's friend, what would you tell her to get her to stop smoking bones? And that was so cool to hear them become advisors to their friend, because they're basically, a lot of them had very soft hearts, very innocent, even though they had been so abused. And it was very sweet to hear. And what I also would do is I made these lines here so they could take the time to write. I wouldn't say just spout off what you want to say. I say, okay, take a few minutes, really think about what you'd want to tell your friend and write it down. And that also helps because there's different types of learners. Some people are just very quick and they can just say it. And other people, would actually never speak if they don't get time to think first. So I would always do that, and a lot more thoughtful responses came. It was nice to give them that time and space for that. Okay, and then the next page we said, well, try as she might, Shiba's sweet friend Merrick was not able to get her to stop smoking bones. In fact, Shiba started smoking more bones more often. It was like she just couldn't get enough. Merrick decided that she loved her friend Shiba, and she would stick by her side even though she could not understand her behavior. She decided to try one last time by posing a question to Shiba. She just simply asked her, why? Why do you smoke bones, Shiba? Why? Is your life really that bad? Shiba thought about that question, and she really did not have an answer. Kind of like the other major why question she had in her life, which really still puzzled her. Why, oh why did my parents dress me in that ice cream sundae costume for Halloween last October? She picked this out, the picture of the dog. I don't know if you guys can see it. She picked out this picture of a dog dressed in an ice cream sundae. Oh, sorry. Like that? Okay. But that was neither here nor there in this moment, as her friend Merrick was looking at her, patiently waiting for her answer. So Shiba got to thinking, why am I smoking all these bones? Is my life really that bad? Discussion question 3. Can you guess why Shiba smoked bones? Unfortunately, Shiba did not have an answer that she was ready to share with her caring friend Merrick. So she told Merrick that day, I don't know. Please don't hate me. Please still be my friend. Merrick agreed to stay friends, and Shiba continued smoking bones. But Merrick's question did make her think a little deeper, and she did realize something kind of important. Shiba realized that smoking bones helped her deal with painful emotions that she just didn't want to face. When Shiba wasn't high, she used to have to face a flood of emotions such as feeling overwhelmed, scared, upset, discouraged, rejected, guilty, inferior, depressed, powerless, and isolated. Well, now that she was getting in touch with her feelings, she also realized that she couldn't leave out a few other feelings, which were sad, frustrated, bewildered, disappointed, confused, and ashamed. Now that's a whole lot of feelings, especially for a little girl who never told me anything about how she felt. So finally it all started coming out. And then we asked, can you relate to having any of these feelings? Which ones? And what did you do to manage them? And the kids really opened up with that too. So there's a blank page in here, and then go to the next one. Shiba also had something even worse than all those feelings. She was having flashbacks, which were memories of a very terrible event that happened to her. The flashbacks brought on all of those horribly, awful, miserably, terrible, painful feelings. When the flashbacks would come, Shiba felt helpless, and she would pray to God that the movie clips playing in her head were just a dream. A very, very bad dream. And honestly speaking, Shiba was not trying to be a bad puppy. She was actually quite young and innocent. It was just that smoking those bones was the only thing that our poor Shiba had found at that time to help her cope with her emotional pain. And then we asked the kids in the discussion in the group, can you relate to having flashbacks to a painful event from the past? What did you do to cope with the flashbacks? What could Shiba have done that would have been a healthier choice instead of smoking bones? So obviously all the kids had a major childhood trauma. That's why they were there, right? So all of them had flashbacks, and all of them started sharing. Very, very powerful. And by now, I know you are wondering, what were the flashbacks from? What could possibly have happened to cause all these painful feelings for our young Shiba? You have reached the point in the story where it is time for Shiba's big secret to be revealed. This is probably the hardest thing she's ever had to do in her life. And no, it's not what you think. Telling her secret was not as hard as keeping her secret. The agony Shiva felt just broke her heart and made her feel so distant from her loved ones that she had to hold her secret for so long, over 1 year, keeping it buried away very deep from all those who cared for her and who could have helped her. Just be patient and listen. We are almost there with sharing Shiva's big secret. But first, look at how keeping the secret kept her in more pain because the people who loved her did not know she was suffering, so they could not help her. And Shiva also had lost her faith in God. She used to be able to feel God's presence, but after this horrible event happened to her, she felt disconnected to God even. She began questioning God, wondering, how could God let this happen to me? My life was going good. I'm so young and innocent, and why didn't you protect me? If he is as good as everyone is talking about, then why would he let people in my life hurt me? I just don't know what I believe anymore. And the discussion was about God. If you believe in God, have you ever experienced a time in your life where you actually questioned his presence? What kind words might you be able to offer Shiva about God's presence? And they all had a time in their life because they'd all been abused by someone they trusted, So that was a very good conversation. And this is the end. This is the last part of the story. Now we have reached the end of the story where Shiva's secret is revealed. Shiva was sexually abused one night while camping with some family friends. When she was sleeping, she woke up suddenly and was alarmed at what this German Shepherd predator was doing to her. So she picked the animal, This incident is where those feelings she had been experiencing came from, a feeling of ashamed, powerless, confused, inferior, guilty, helpless, and many other feelings a victim of sexual abuse would feel. How confused our little Shiva felt when a much older, bigger, scarier dog was attacking her. And scared, very scared. So scared that she could not speak. In fact, she pretended to still be asleep because she was so scared to fight back against that big beast. She kept her eyes shut and just kicked and rolled over away from him. But that did not stop him. He was relentless, forcing himself on her over and over again on that night from hell. Sorry. And this is what has been tormenting her in her head for over 1 year now. Her brain was crying out for help by playing that movie over and over again until she surrendered. When she finally opened her mouth to reveal her secret, others opened their hearts to help Shiba, so she finally could get help in a way that smoking bones were no match for. Shiba finally felt close to her family again after telling her secret, and her healing began. And then the discussion we had was, have you ever had a similar experience where your mind kept playing a flashback until you were willing to look at it and deal with it? If you could give Shiba one bit of kind words, what would you tell her to help her find the strength to get through this? Very powerful story. And very healing for everybody, So I'll end on this to respect our time limit, but next week we can talk about this. Just see what came up for you. And and then we'll keep going. Okay? Thank you guys for being here and for listening and participating.